Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. And today we're going to be looking at the story of the 2024 election based on the most internationally accurate pollster of the United States elections in the past two cycles. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so AtlasIntel is one of the most accurate pollsters across the nation. Not only is it one of the most accurate in the United States, but if we scroll down here, they were basically the most accurate according to Nate Silver. They've gotten an A+ rating from 538, as well as having a gold star standard, according to the New York Times. They were the most accurate pollster in the 2022 presidential election in Brazil. They were also the most accurate pollster in the 2022 constitutional, whatever this is, of Chile. We also have the fact that they were the most accurate in Argentina in the past three Argentinian presidential cycles. And they were the only ones that were able to predict the first round winner, Sergio Massa, and the runoff winner, Javier Milei. They were the only pollster who was able to do that in 2023. And looking at here, they also were the most, accurate in the primaries and in the first round and runoff for the 2022 presidential race in Colombia. So they also got that correct as well. And then looking at this, they were also the only pollster that were able to correctly anticipate the deadlock resulting from the 2023 legislative elections in Spain. And so looking at this, right, once we added this poll into our average and we kind of tested this out, this is something really interesting that we did test out. But when we actually go to my site now, guys, when we look at this, Donald Trump is now up in our average by 3.9 percentage points. The poll gets a lot of weight because it's been more historically accurate. I've been playing around with the weighting all day, going off of my 2020 polling average, which is Biden plus 5.2, by the way. And the vote shares are like a point under what they actually got in 2020. So I've been playing around with the weights. And I've also created, my own A-graded versions of the averages to see if there's any difference. And believe it or not, the A-graded averages, which only include Rasmussen reports, Big Poll Data, AtlasIntel, and Emerson, those four polls, when you include them in an average, just them, they're actually more left-leaning than the final average with all of the liberal pollsters included. You need those in the average because they're able to add support to either candidate that otherwise those accurate pollsters may not be able to see because they have more accurate electorates. And what I found is when we apply the AtlasIntel electorates from their latest poll to both elections, so the last poll for 2020 for them, I applied the electorate. Then the same thing goes for the 2020 polling. When I apply them, you get Biden plus 5.2 in the final average, and you also get now Trump up by 3.9% in the popular vote. Their poll today had Donald Trump up by 3.6 percentage points in the full field. And that's also what we track here at On Point Politics as well. We track the full field, and Donald Trump is just destroying Kamala Harris in our models update. I mean, he's winning Minnesota, for crying out loud. And our polling average, when you adjust for the 2020 electorate, she's only up in Minnesota by like 1.5 points. She's not up by that much in Minnesota. He's killing it in Wisconsin. He's killing it in Pennsylvania. And by the way, we actually weighted the three different categories. So the polling average / personal estimate, the demographic margins, which are now also based on AtlasIntel's polling. And we also go into the popular vote margin plus nonpartisan leaning. So when you include all of these and you weight them properly in the 2020 model, you get Biden with 306 electoral college votes to Trump's 232. We're able to accurately predict all of the state outcomes and be a point or two within the actual result. So that is also something very, very fascinating to see. And when you test the model, this is the previous run of the model. We could actually pull up what the model is showing right now. Go ahead and put that on your screen. So guys, looking at the 2020 map, we see here, for example, Alaska plus 8 for Trump. I mean, he won the state by 10 points. looking at this again, like Arizona plus 1.8 for Biden. And I also did my own polling averages for the individual states as well. So when you average it out and you apply the weights that we basically got to estimate best to the 2020 results, when you apply those weights, you get this result, and you get Donald Trump with Biden, with 306 electoral college votes. I mean, North Carolina, R plus 0.2, Trump won it by 1.3. That's better than any model would have given you. It still would have been to the left. This model would have actually still overestimated Biden by a point or two in some states, but overall would have still given us a fairly accurate result. Looking at Wisconsin, Biden plus 1.4. Pennsylvania, basically around there, about almost the same. I mean, they would have overestimated each candidate by a little bit more than half a point around there, but still would have been within the range. I mean, Nevada plus 3, it would have been Biden plus 2.4. I mean, you can't find a model out here who would have been better. But Biden plus 3.2 in Michigan, that's 0.4 percentage points off of the actual result. I mean, there's no model out there you could have found. You couldn't have found a better model. So when applying AtlasIntel, also look at Nebraska second, plus 6.1. When we go to the result, it ended up being plus 6.6. Minnesota, I mean, I could keep going. Biden plus 8.2. I mean, it ended up being Biden plus 7.1. Like, there is no other model you could have found to have gotten anything better. Iowa plus 7.7. I mean, that's 0.4, 0.5 percentage points off. Like, you couldn't have found anything better out there. 538 would have been inferior to this model. Biden plus 14.3 in Colorado. Biden plus 13.5. So again, it's not on the money, exactly, but it's way better than a lot of the state averages or models you would have found out there. Even South Carolina's margin plus 11.3. Donald Trump won the state by 11.7. You wouldn't have been able to find a model that would have been more accurate than this. And so it just goes to show, when you implement AtlasIntel's, polling data and demographic modeling from 538, you see that Donald Trump is destroying Kamala Harris in the Electoral College. And we're going to be able to tell a pretty interesting story throughout the cycle. So the first AtlasIntel poll was conducted in February of 2024. When this poll was conducted, Donald Trump was up in the national popular vote by roughly a point, 1.6%, right? Kennedy was getting about 5. You don't know at about 5. So there was a lot of undecideds. And you clearly see people who were undecided. It was about even with who there were. A lot of them were younger voters that were undecided. A lot more, funny enough, there was more undecideds that were non-college, which was interesting. A lot of lower income voters were more undecided. So it was younger, low income, non-college, Asian, and white voters that were more undecided. That's a very, very interesting demographic. And it was also majority male. And then that might not have played out well for Biden. It just may have not. Trump was crushing Biden with independents at the beginning of the year. And Trump was getting 11% of Democrats. So it was a brutal smackdown. I mean, just brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And so when you model that out based on all the demographic modeling, also look at this. Funny enough, Biden would have been beating Nikki Haley by 17, 18 points back in February of 2024. That's kind of hilarious. And Kennedy was getting about 11%. That's crazy. That's horrendous. And look at this. Michelle Obama, I mean, she only led him by roughly 3 points in this. That's not great either. I mean, I would have expected her to do way better, and she wasn't. She was only getting 50% of black voters in this poll. I mean, for crying out loud, he was still getting 19% here. He was actually winning Hispanics too. Also winning Hispanics. Now, she did way better with Asians and way better with white voters, but the fact she was doing that poorly with black voters, and that's just not good. That is horrendous. And I mean, you clearly saw even young voters. I mean, there was a lot of undecideds, but Trump is still up with them. So that would have been a disaster as well. And so when you model that out in the Electoral College, Donald Trump would have been winning 313 electoral votes to Biden's 225. It would have been the modest victory that everybody would have thought would have happened. Then the debate came when Biden basically had his brain fall out on stage, and as time was going on, Donald Trump was gaining and gaining and gaining, and to the point where in the next poll, Donald Trump was leading by 5.2%. Kennedy shot up all the way up to 10, by the way. So this was a disaster. I mean, Trump was killing him with 18 and 29-year-old voters. Like, it wasn't even close, and they weren't even undecided anymore. Look at this. Kennedy was in second place in this poll with 18 and 29-year-old voters, which is what I suspected would happen. Kennedy was demolishing Joe Biden with these voters, getting a quarter of them. Now, granted, Trump was doing worse with 65 plus and 44 to 64-year-olds, but this was a smackdown like no other. I mean, Trump was still getting 29% of black voters, still only losing Hispanics by 12, winning whites by almost 15 points, about 14, give or take. And so when you put all these demographics, Donald Trump was getting 336 Electoral College votes to Joe Biden's 202, according to the poll. He's winning all the swing states fairly easily, getting Nebraska second by 4.5, and somewhat competitive in Maine, New Mexico, and Colorado. I mean, Donald Trump was performing way better with college-educated voters, and there's a lot of them in states like Maine and New Mexico and Colorado and Arizona, Georgia. There's a lot of them there that are significantly better. Now, of course, Joe Biden dropped out of the race, and he was on track to do pretty bad going into the middle of July. I guarantee you, if they had if Atlas had polled Trump versus Biden at the end of July, they probably would have found a Trump +7, +8 lead, because things were getting horrendous. I mean, my polling average had Donald Trump up by 7 points, basically from June 21st to July 21st. Trump was up by 7. So more than likely, Atlas would have found something within that range at the time. And so looking at this now, looking at this polling, this is something very interesting. This is going to surprise everybody. Looking at this new poll, yes, Donald Trump did gain from the last poll, but Kamala Harris also picked up a bunch of support from a lot of disaffected third-party voters and picked up some undecided. So all that happened is some RFK voters that were more left-leaning went to Kamala Harris, and she was doing better in the head-to-head, by the way. She was doing worse in the head-to-head against Donald Trump than without RFK. So now that map would have looked like this. So Donald Trump would have still been back to 313 to 225. Now here's the thing that I want you to notice, and this is what I was saying. This is what Rich Barris was saying. We have been hammering this point home time and time and time again. She is very weak. Kamala Harris is weak in the Rust Belt. And what do we find? Comparing this poll to the one back in February, where the race was somewhat similar, look at the Rust Belt. The map is the same, except Donald Trump is performing better in New England and the Rust Belt by slight margins, but albeit still doing better in the Rust Belt while performing the same in the Sun Belt and everywhere else. So Kamala Harris has a very big weakness in the Sun Belt states, a very bad weakness in some of these states. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed Donald Trump. Donald Trump had a tied debate with Harris, give or take, depending on how you look at it. Donald Trump is having his highest favorables. And looking at the poll from today, Donald Trump is up by 3.6% in the latest AtlasIntel poll. And so what does that mean, guys? And look at this, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, which candidate do you reject more? Kamala Harris is up in this question by 3 points, which is interesting. And when we look at this, this is the interesting part. More 30 to 44-year-olds reject Harris. That's the interesting thing that you see there. And also, funny enough, the rural vote's also the highest group of that. We also see here people who reject Harris, the highest group, believe it or not, is actually Hispanics. That's very interesting. That's a very telling sign, as well as the other group. I mean, those are the groups where Harris is the most rejected by, which I find very, very fascinating. And we see this, you're talking about independents. They're rejecting Harris by roughly 2 points. And we even see a majority of women are rejecting Harris in this poll. A majority of women, albeit very close, but a slight majority are rejecting Harris in this poll. And so the race is, according to this, headed back to where it was post-debate with Joe Biden. When you model out all the new demographics here, Donald Trump is up 323 electoral college votes to Harris's 215 when you model out all the states. And so when you apply this demographic model, including the popular vote plus nonpartisan leaning plus my own polling averages, and you weigh it out to get an accurate 2020 model, like I just described earlier, Donald Trump is up in the electoral college, 327 electoral college votes to 211. I know you guys may think I'm nuts. I know you guys may think, there's no way this would happen. But guys, I'm telling you, it is looking really bad. This poll was a horrible poll for Harris. And when we add it into the aggregate, it is just completely boosting Donald Trump. And we recently moved to their electorate today, which was only a point redder, by the way, guys. So, and by the way, when you only include the 4 A-rated pollsters based on the margin of error, when you include only the A-rated pollsters, when you just include them into the average, Trump's up by like 3.1. It actually leans more left, by the way. So these quote-unquote low-quality right pollsters, except for Emerson, that being Rasmussen, Big Poll Data by Rich Barris, and AtlasIntel, and Emerson College, when you put those 4, because arguably they were the most A-rated pollsters from 2020, and when you add those same pollsters into the 2024 average and you just do them, Trump's only up by 3.1. So the quote-unquote low-quality right-leaning average will actually be more left-leaning. Even if you did that, Donald Trump would still be losing Minnesota and New Hampshire. Probably not even New Hampshire. He probably wouldn't even be losing there. So the only difference is Minnesota. That's literally the only difference that could basically go either way. I mean, New Hampshire could go either way, but that's really like the only true difference. Like, and even if you took an average of those, right? Let's say we even took an average of that. So 3.9, 3.1. Let's say that the popular, let's say it's 3.5. Let's say that's the case, right? Even if that was the case, Donald Trump is still up in Minnesota and New Hampshire. He's still up. And if we used the more accurate one, let's say we use that one. If we went to that one, Harris is roughly, give or take, let's let this load, still up in Minnesota. New Hampshire is the one that goes blue, believe it or not. That's actually the one that goes blue. Minnesota actually goes red first. So, guys, it is not looking good. Even if we were to use the original average from yesterday with the tied electorate, even if we use that, Minnesota is still super tilt blue. And it doesn't change the race. It literally does not change the race at all. It's just Minnesota and New Hampshire that are basically up for grabs. And when we look at our polling averages there, it is not looking good at all. It's just not looking great. It's really not. It is looking horrendously bad for Kamala Harris, guys. I'm telling you, it is looking ridiculously bad, guys. And looking at the histogram for the Electoral College results, I mean, Harris on the lower end of 8 simulations is at a floor of 204 Electoral College votes, which is already abysmal. Donald Trump's minimum performance at 8, by the way, at just 8 results, his minimum performance is 245 in the Electoral College. So that's actually, I think, looking at it now, if we were to test that out, I actually think that's him getting Wisconsin with North Carolina. So according to this, there is practically no way that Harris could basically win Wisconsin according to the simulations, which is pretty nuts if you think about it. That's pretty nuts. Her floor was 204. I'm actually curious to see what would have to create that. I'm assuming it is probably, what would it be here? Because maybe, okay, there it goes. So it's probably this. This is probably what created that. It's probably New Mexico's up for grabs. Virginia probably goes blue. So according to my simulations model, based off the new projection, Trump is already at 245 with Wisconsin in his column. Already with Wisconsin. And usually the Rust Belt tends to vote together in presidential elections. Ever since 1992, it's voted together. Looking at 1988, they did vote separately one time. Dukakis kind of did very well in the Driftless area in Wisconsin in 88. But that is about it. Those states have voted together. So if Wisconsin's going, if you have 8 out of the 1,000 simulations and you have it happen as a minimum result with a tolerance line of 8 simulations out of the 1,000, Donald Trump is already winning Wisconsin. And so all he's got to do is pick off Pennsylvania and Nevada, and he's got the presidency. He could get a combination of Georgia and Arizona and win the presidency. He could win Michigan and win the presidency. I mean, when you look at the odds in some of these states, Donald Trump 67% in Wisconsin, 76 in Florida, Texas about 80% odds in Texas, Georgia 66, North Carolina 70% odds in North Carolina. Arizona, you got about a 68% chance there for Trump. Nevada 64%. Minnesota, he's now in the lead. Same thing in New Hampshire. He's now favored in the odds there. And if we look at the histogram, the most common result that occurs basically up here is 306 for Donald Trump. That is the most reoccurring electoral college count. Maybe that Nebraska's second electoral vote is a little bit off, but there's one electoral vote here that seems to be a little bit funny. But that's about it. Another common scenario is Trump 290 to Harris 248, which is probably him getting Michigan, or him getting Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, but not Nebraska second, Nevada, or Michigan. Another common scenario is Harris with 253 to Trump 285, which that would be, we could actually do those. So I believe this is Trump, 91. I wonder what would get him to 290, but this is probably where around that would be. And then 285 is actually this. This is the interesting one. It's actually this result where he's winning Nevada and the Rust Belt, but not Georgia, Arizona, or New Mexico, or any of the other states. So even in more reoccurring scenarios, he's still winning the Electoral College. And just to let you know, guys, if anybody has this map, if anyone has this map like this, it is not likely for that result to occur in our estimates. It's not likely at all for that to even happen. I can actually look it up here and see how common that is, but it's really not that common of a result. It's really, really not. I mean, you got it right there. I mean, it's 271 for Harris, because that's what that result would be. I mean, it happens 12 out of the 1,000 simulations. So it's definitely possible, but it's not one of the most reoccurring simulations in this model. It's just not. Another very big reoccurring one is 313 to 225. And everything above 8 simulations, Harris's floor is 202. Trump's ceiling is 336, which is what he actually got right here. So again, guys, I'm telling you, it is not looking good for Kamala Harris. And I hate to break it to everybody on X and on YouTube, but things are headed in the direction of basically post-Biden debate. Because RFK's endorsement really helped the former president more than anybody could have imagined. And so, if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video. But before I end that off, let me make sure to introduce you guys to Bet Online. We can go over here and basically bet on the races we want to bet on. We can bet on Donald Trump winning the 2024 presidential election, all of the actual state chances, as well as the margins, including the Senate races and who's going to win the House of Representatives.